Yep, guess what? I'm mad again. So here's another video. Uh, I'm currently working on a project, Crop and Claw 2. I've made some major changes to the infrastructure, which means I actually have custom file loading. This makes modding much easier. It does not require Godot, and the reason for this is because we actually use a custom editor. The problem with this is we also rely on some plugins. We need to import MIDIs because, yeah, we're supporting MIDIs, SF2. Tiled, we're using tiled instead of just built-in Godot tile editor. Uh, all these tools I've been using Yachty, I've been using some MIDI importer I don't remember the name of. But the problems are they have a painful reliance on file access. So in short, I'm going to do a quick video on how to just get around this problem. It's not a hard problem to get around. This really isn't hard. You could probably spend a day in your code base, like, fixing this issue, depending on how big your importer is. So let's dive on in. So for this little test project here, I've got two files. They are two separate files for the sake of showing that this is working. Game.yay. Yay is our custom file format. It's literally just text. But it's a message that's going to get read in dynamically, and it could be run at runtime. So it's not like it'll break if you use res or whatever. So this one is going to be used by FileAccess. And this is a zipped version of that. Game.yay inside the zip, and it's just going to indicate that it's from ZipReader. I've got the first version of this script. You can see the little loader here. So we've just got a message saying we're not loaded yet. So I'm going to take what's called bad.gd, and bad.gd is what everyone uses and what everyone does when they write importers. Bear in mind, I'm also talking about runtime importers. I think a lot of people write their importers assuming it's always going to be turned into a Godot resource. If you write your importers correctly, you start with your runtime importer and then you work on the editor version. And there will be a much better code base than if you were to, say, write an editor-only version and then work on the runtime. If you work backwards like that, you're going to cause yourself a lot of headaches. So here's bad. We have the label that we're going to write our text to, and it's just going to happen as soon as the scene starts with ready. String, we're just going to load this. We're going to get the string out of the file, and then we're just going to write the data to the label so it'll appear. So let's look at how that looks. See, this is what it looks like. Isn't that adorable? So here's how this works. This is pretty trivial. If you've written a plugin, you know what to expect, FileAccess and all that, but I'm going to explain it for the sake of explaining why it's a terrible idea. So here, we pass in a path, obviously, like we're pulling from the user directory so that we just know this is possible to run at runtime. Path and file contents, that's going to be what we finally export to the label. File, we open the file with FileAccess. We get as text. Your custom importer is most likely going to do like some fancy parsing, but for the sake of explanation, let's go with just text. Normally, you'll be working with a packed buffer array or byte array or whatever. We close the file, we print it out into the terminal for fun, and then we return. And as I shown, that's how you get this. Now here's where everything goes wrong. As I said, I need to use zips. Not only do I need to use zips, I have a very complicated way of doing it that isn't really relevant here. But for this, this works if you are prototyping, if you just need to get it down. I still don't recommend it. So let's improve this by making it actually useful for people who don't have file access for a certain reason. Either it's coming from a zip or it's coming from, I don't know, HTTP requests or something. I'm going to take good.gd and place that over here. So we have this. We have a boolean for the editor just to showcase the difference between file access and zip access. Here, we start up with ready as normal. We are allocating a reference to a packed byte array. Because if you've written plugins, what you truly know is that, really, if you've touched anything with files, you are just getting a file pointer to a bunch of bytes. It's your job to translate those bytes. So we're going to load all those bytes But how we're going to do it depends. So if we have use file access set to true, we are going to load similar to before, but we're going to call this function get data from file. If we do not, we're going to assume that we're going to be using zip. So here's get data from zip. We're going to pass in a zip, and then we're going to pass in a file within the zip. We do as normal. We are going to pass in load data better, which we'll get to in a second, and it just sets the label as same as always before. So load data better is much shorter because we've removed the coupling of file access and parsing data. That is what you should take away from this. Remove file access from data parsing and processing and allocations and all those. Decouple that. So here, instead of a path, we only take in the packed byte array. This is what we're going to parse. This is what we're going to do data on, and we're going to output something that Godot can actually use, or whatever engine we're basically creating here. This is not even just a Godot thing. This is just, you should probably just write things like this, even if you're not writing a Godot, because it's just that much more powerful. Here we have two functions. You get data from file. We just get the data as bytes. And you'll notice here in load data better, we are just accepting bytes, and then we are doing a function to parse the data into something usable. Get string from UTF-8. We take the UTF-8 and we dump it in here to the label, and done. So let's show that running. I'm going to go over here, turn file access on, and just like before, we've just loaded it very similarly, but now if we don't have that, we have use file access as false, we are going to load data from a zip file. And so here we're going to put in the zip and the path to the actual file within the zip. Just allocate a zip reader. We open it. Load data, packed byte array again, generic bytes. That's all we need. We're going to load that into RAM, close it, and return those bytes, which goes back here as before. And we pass that into load data better. It parses the data as UTF-8, just like before. And then we return the data, and showing that in motion, it just looks like this. See, now, why is this so important? Why am I harping on this so hard? Because here's the thing. If you do this, you as a plugin writer have less work to do. You are making yourself work harder by doing all the file access like inside the plugin. Because you can now make any source of data usable. Like, as long as you have a way to get that data, you could just take it and translate it to what you're actually trying to import. Now, you can have an interface that takes file access, and by default, especially with Godot, you're probably going to use that. But now, you're not assuming what the user is actually trying to do. You could, in theory, like, throw this into a coroutine. And if you throw into a coroutine, you can, like, async await, like, a downloading a file or something. So you can just do that, and then, you know, import the whatever you've just downloaded, and hope it's secure, or sanitize it while you're parsing it, whatever. But now, you've decoupled the problem from how you're getting the data to be a problem in the first place. But we can make this even better, because, of course we can. So, best.gd. Best.gd, we don't even need to pass in a file name in order to get the data. We are going to assume that either the user is just going to use file access with maybe some version of it we wrote. We're not like, we can now decouple literally everything from our problem domain of parsing bytes into something useful. So here, I've just set up a temporary just showcase placeholder here of an enumerator export with a string, just creating this. Here, I'm creating a dictionary of callables. I am using 4.4 dev 5, but if you're using anything before, you're going to have to use a generic dictionary. So here, I'm just going to, I guess for the sake of example, I'll just remove that. Here, I'm actually binding my functions. Now, obviously, this is actually something we're going to be expecting the user to either do or rely on something that we've already written that just does the same thing. So here we actually bind get data from file or bind get data from zip, and we pass in those parameters as just bound arguments. Now we've just got callables in a dictionary, and here's how this works. Here we have fetch data callable. It's a first class function that we are going to ultimately expect will call no arguments and return a packed byte array. We don't know how it's going to be done. We as plugin writers just know a function should be called and we should get a packed byte array out of it. Here is a dictionary called. Gonna just grab whichever one of these two is going to be relevant based on what our load method is, which we'll set in the inspector in a moment. And as usual, we'll load data functionally. We're going to pass in that callable, and then we're going to actually throw it onto the label as normal. Here, let's actually show this in motion. So no load file. See up here, I've got file and I've got zip. So here we go to open. Here we go. It's FileAccess. Amazing. If we change that to zip, look at that. It's zip. Now, why is this impressive? It's now trivial. It's like brain dead trivial for people to just add their own ways to load things. What if they're using some custom weird source? Like, what if they have to load something from an SFTP or FTP or HTTP or whatever TTP? Maybe they've got some weird system. I don't know. You don't need to make those assumptions. You personally do not care where their files are coming from. You only care about, here's the data, I need to import it into something usable. And that's what this is important for. Fetch data callable. We call it. We don't even care. We'll just have to make sure that the user knows we don't want to pass any information. Now, maybe for some specific reason you might want to, but that's context sensitive to your domain. You're going to have to make that call. But here, I'm just going to assume that whatever context they need to load packed byte arrays is going to be in the function call itself. And we're going to call that function, evaluate it into a bunch of bytes, and then we're going to do our normal parsing. Here it is, UTF-8, done. We return that, we get it thrown here. That's it. But basically, anyone can just write their own ways to import the data, and all you have to do is call whatever they feed in and read the data and parse it as you normally would. And if you need to like recursively load stuff, just give them like some kind of extra parameter. Anyone who implements this system will have less maintenance to do with their code and just make it far, far more flexible and more powerful for bizarre use cases like me. Now, before you think I'm picking on all the plugin developers out there, don't worry, because Godot's actually guilty of the same exact mistake that everyone else is making. Their CSV system is only partially functional, because you can load it fine from files, and the importer does that for translations. The problem is it's bound to file access. It mutates a file pointer. It's a very obnoxious code to decouple from the logic of the file access class. If you want some brownie points, I did actually open an issue that they should just make a static CSV parser class or something. You can go check that out. Translations are probably not even possible to do without turning them into files or baking them into the executable, which I don't want to do. We have a custom plugin that we're using. I needed to load information without any particular knowledge as to where it's coming from, because this abstraction is necessary for helping me write not only code that works in runtime, but also in our custom editor. So here, you can actually download this. I've open sourced it because I'm lazy, whatever. And here, this is all, I should probably point out, very cursory. It's probably going to change because I'm still testing it. I'm still writing it. But it's a very, very interesting little way of doing all this, where I have file access here. I have zip reader, zip writer, its own virtual file system access. These are little containers of functionality that allow me to load from multiple sources arbitrarily. I can do all sorts of cool things with it. I'm looking to do HTTP later, maybe caching of its own system because we're not using Godot's caching. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it if you know what you're doing. Custom import formats. You can actually like write your own custom import formats. A lot of cool stuff. Anyways, if this was the best video you've ever seen, you can support us by just, I don't know, go buy Crop and Claw on Steam or go follow us on Blue Sky or something. Itch also has Crop and Claw. We'll be uploading games there too. Cheerios.